HFY Vanguard, the galaxy may be vast, but so is our ambition. Our story starts right here. Jonathan Mercer's breath fogged the air, each exhale curling like ghostly tendrils in the frigid corridor. His boots crunched against the frost-rimmed metal floor as he moved with careful, deliberate steps. The light overhead flickered again, throwing jagged shadows across the rust-stained door before him. Red paint, long since cracked and fading, still spelled out a warning in block letters. "Quarantine, do not open." Mercer smirked humorlessly behind the face shield of his breather mask. They always write that. And behind those words, treasure. The kind that turns a broke scav into a man with choices. He set down his pack, flexed his gloved hands, and studied the seam where door met frame. The years had welded grime and rust into the gap, but not enough to fool his trained eye. A line of weakness waiting for steel and willpower. His fingers brushed the crowbar strapped to his belt. The tool had outlasted partnerships, even governments. It would outlast this door too. Sweat prickled down his back despite the freezing temperature. Adrenaline was heat, and adrenaline sang in his veins. Nobody seals something worthless, he told himself. If they bothered to mark it to lock it, then what's inside is worth dying for. Or killing for. He leaned his ear against the door, listening. Nothing. No hum of machinery, no faint scrape of claws or shuffle of boots. Just silence. Thick, oppressive silence. The kind that pressed against the eardrum and made a man imagine things lurking in the dark. "Come on, then," he muttered, setting his crowbar against the seam. He shoved muscles straining, metal groan, rust flaked. With a hiss like an exhaled breath, the seal broke. A gust of stale, bitter air washed over him, smelling faintly of ozone and mold. The door lurched inward a fraction, then stopped. Mercer wedged his shoulder against it and forced his way through. Beyond lay darkness, a darkness so complete his headlamp seemed swallowed, reduced to a pale glow. His boots scraped concrete as he descended 3 narrow steps into the chamber below. The air was colder here, but not dead. There was a charge to it, as though something unseen lingered watching. Mercer's instincts prickled. He swept the beam of his lamp across rows of corroded pipes, flaking panels, dangling cables. Then the light caught on something different. Something curved and glistening. Glass. At the center of the chamber, half buried in frost, stood a containment pod. The glass was opaque with ice, but the unmistakable outline of a curled figure pressed faintly against its inner surface. Beside the pod lay another shape human at first glance, until the beam revealed the truth. Limbs sprawled at unnatural angles. A chest cavity open hollow. Metal ribs gleaming beneath tatters of synthetic flesh. An android, or the remains of one. Cobwebs draped the figure like a shroud, a once magnificent creation left broken and cold. Mercer knelt, brushing ice crystals from the pod's surface, peering inside. His breath caught. It was no man inside, nor any human. A child, a girl perhaps 12 years old, skin the pale blue of twilight, almost glowing beneath the frost. Her hair clung damp to her forehead, silver white against the darkness. She wore a simple shift of gray fabric, thin, inadequate for the cold. Her small body was curled in sleep, serene, as if untouched by time. Mercer's gut twisted. He had expected valuables. Weapons, maybe? Tech he could strip and sell. Not this, not a kid. "What the hell were you doing in here, little one?" he whispered, his voice uncomfortably loud in the silence. The pod responded before she could. A panel flickered weakly, lines of green text crawling across the black screen. "Power off, critical." Then nothing. "Damn it," Mercer hissed. If the pod failed, the girl failed with it. Whatever she was, whoever she was, she'd be gone. And with her, any chance Mercer had of profiting from this find. Not that he admitted that part to himself too loudly. He reached instinctively for his toolkit, then froze. A sound, echoing faintly from the corridor above. Metal on metal, rhythmic, heavy, footsteps. Mercer cursed silently, dousing his light. He pressed himself flat against the cold wall blaster in hand. His pulse thudded in his ears. The sound grew louder, closer, then stopped. Silence again, thick as tar. 1 heartbeat, 2, 3. The hiss of releasing seals snapped his head around. The pod was opening. Frost billowed as the cover slid upward. Mercer lifted his blaster half in instinct, half in fear. The girl gasped. Her eyes fluttered open, brilliant gold with vertical pupils that shrank in the dim light. She sat up jerkily like a puppet pulled by unseen strings, then focused on him. Those golden eyes locked onto his unblinking. "Don't move," Mercer whispered. "Someone's coming." She ignored him. She staggered from the pod, bare feet slapping the concrete, stumbling toward the broken android. Her small hands hovered over its shattered chest, trembling. "No, no, no, no," she rasped, her voice raw, unused. She dropped to her knees beside the machine, clutching at cold metal ribs. "Not him. Please, not him." Mercer cursed under his breath. The footsteps outside faded, moving past the chamber, but his nerves still screamed danger. He approached cautiously, reaching for the android's head unit. "Kid, we gotta move. He's dead junk. You're not." Her hand shot out, seizing his wrist. Stronger than expected, stronger than a child should be. Her golden eyes blazed. "He's my brother." Mercer froze. His scavenger's instincts shouted lie, manipulation, madness. But something in her face, desperation, grief, cut deeper than logic. He released the android's head, stepping back slowly. The girl bent lower, tears streaking her blue cheeks, her body racked with sobs. The broken machine remained silent, a corpse of wires and steel. Mercer exhaled hard, the decision forming even as he hated himself for it. He dropped his toolkit to the floor, the metal clattering softly. "You're calling?" he said, spreading the tools out. "But we don't have much time." Her eyes flicked to the gleaming instruments, then back to him. Distrust battled with hope. At last, she snatched a diagnostic probe, her thin fingers working with surprising precision. She plugged it into hidden ports lights, flickering weakly across the android's chest. "Can you fix him?" she asked, not looking up. "Maybe," Mercer admitted, crouching beside her. "Depends on what's broken." He ran a careful hand along the mangled interior, tracing severed connections. The craftsmanship was unlike anything he'd scavenged before, sleek, deliberate, beautiful. This wasn't standard issue. This was something greater. "Someone tore out his core," Mercer muttered, frowning, "and the power module. But they did it careful. They wanted him disabled, not destroyed." The girl's lips pressed into a thin line. She reached into her shift pocket, pulling free a small black cylinder. "I took this," she whispered, "before they put me in the pod." Mercer's eyes widened. The processor, maybe still intact. The ceiling shuddered, suddenly dust sifting down. A harsh blue glow flared across a wall-mounted screen. "Imperial cleanse inbound, 8 to 58 minutes. Mercer swore viciously. They were about to vaporize the entire site. He looked at the girl. She was trembling, clutching the processor like a lifeline, her eyes full of fear. "You came to sell me, didn't you?" she accused softly. "Came for scrap," Mercer said, honestly, jerking a thumb at his pack. "Found you instead." He grabbed a soldering iron, setting it to heat. "And now we've got less than an hour to fix your friend and get out alive." The girl's eyes burned into his. Then with surprising composure, she handed him a power cell from the folds of her shift. "Not a thing," she said firmly. "Him." Mercer took it, sliding it into place with practiced speed. Lights flickered. The android spasmed. A red glow pulsed faintly at its temple. "Access restricted," a synthetic voice rasped. "Show Royal protocol." Mercer blinked. "Royal." The girl leaned close, her voice trembling, but steady. "Override Liena 649. The android's silver eyes snapped open, focused, then widened. "Legacy Empire Liena." Mercer stared. Royal protocol. A princess. His chest tightened. This wasn't treasure. This was trouble. The kind you didn't crawl back from. And yet when the child's tears streaked again down her luminescent cheeks, he reached out without thinking. His thumb brushed the cold skin, wiping them away. "Don't cry, little one," he murmured. "I'll fix your android. Promise." The android's eyes glowed faintly, silver discs flickering like dying stars. Its body convulsed, then slammed back against the concrete floor with a metallic thud that echoed through the chamber. The child flinched but didn't retreat. Instead, she leaned closer, whispering words that were half command, half prayer. "Arik, it's me. Wake up, please." The android's lips moved with halting, mechanical stiffness. A rasping voice emerged, layered with distortion. System integrity. Compromised. Core processor restored. Power at 23%. Mercer exhaled. Well, hell, it's breathing again. Sort of. The girl turned to him, golden eyes shining with urgency. He's alive. You can fix him, right? You promised. Mercer rubbed at the stubble along his jaw, fighting the instinct to walk away. The scavenger in him screamed to cut his losses. Grab the girl, sell her to the highest bidder. Or ditch her, escape the cleanse, and live to scavenge another day. But another voice whispered in the back of his mind, quieter, harsher. She's a kid, and you've already got too many ghosts chasing you. You really want to add one more. He forced a crooked grin. Alive's a strong word, but yeah, I can try. The girl's small blue hands trembled as she helped steady the android's head. Mercer crouched beside her, setting his toolkit wide open. He plucked a wire tracer and a portable welding wand, his fingers moving with the precision of long habit. What's his name? He asked almost without thinking. Arik, she said softly. Mercer raised an eyebrow. Nice name. Yours. The girl hesitated. A flicker of caution crossed her face before she whispered, Lena. Mercer nearly laughed. The android had said it already, so this was confirmation. All right, Lena, let's see if we can get your brother walking again. He set to work, reconnecting severed pathways, checking circuits, sealing fractured joints. Lena hovered, handing him tools when he asked plier solder, a diagnostic scanner far too heavy for her small arms. Still, she bore the weight without complaint. Her hands moved with uncanny familiarity, as though she'd done this before. You know your way around wires, Mercer muttered. Arik taught me, she said simply. He said I should understand how he works, in case he needed me. Mercer grunted, not trusting himself to reply. The girl's devotion pressed against his cynicism like a blade. He'd seen hardened smugglers show less loyalty to blood relatives. Arik's chest lights pulsed irregularly, then steadied. His voice emerged again, smoother this time. Power module functional, cognitive functions incomplete. Memory access fragmented. Lena's relief was palpable. She pressed her forehead briefly against the android's cold chest plating, as if seeking comfort from a heartbeat that wasn't there. Mercer frowned, tugging gently at one of the severed connectors. Whoever tore this out knew what they were doing. Military precision, not some random pirate smash job. Lena stiffened. Her fingers dug into the android's frame. Who was it? Mercer pressed. Her lips trembled. They wanted information. About Mother. About me. Arik tried to protect me. They hurt him, broke him, and then... She swallowed hard. They locked me in the pod, Mother Mercer echoed. Before she could answer, the ceiling shuddered again. Dust cascaded. The wall screen pulsed with a new update. Imperial cleanse S to 51 minutes. Mercer swore. The clock was running faster than he'd hoped. His hands flew over the android's chest, slotting the processor back into place. Sparks snapped. A smell of ozone bit the air. Stay with me, Tin Man, Mercer muttered. Stay with me. Arik twitched. Command override. Lena Navarin. Identity confirmed. Mercer froze. The name slammed into him like a fist. Navarin. He didn't need a data chip to recognize that surname. It belonged to one of the most powerful royal houses in the known systems. Which meant the girl kneeling in the frost, her small hands trembling against her brother's cold body, wasn't just some lost kid. She was a princess. The weight of that truth pressed heavy in Mercer's gut. He looked at her anew, the delicate lines of her face, the luminescent blue of her skin, those golden predator's eyes. Royal, untouchable, dangerous. Kid, Mercer started, but the words stuck. What was he supposed to say? Hey, congratulations. You're worth more than any scrap in the galaxy, but also worth a bullet to anyone who finds you. Before he could stumble, through Arik spoke again, voice steadier. Mobility at 42%. Combat functions offline. Protective directive active. Lena's smile was small but radiant. He'll protect us. We'll be safe. Mercer barked a harsh laugh. Safe, kid. We're in a vault that's about to be turned into stardust with a broken robot. And he cut himself short, and nowhere to run. Lena's eyes locked onto his defiant. You'll get us out. Mercer almost choked. You're awfully confident in a stranger with a crowbar. You didn't leave me, she said simply. Everyone else did. The words silenced him. He had no defense. Minutes bled away as Mercer reinforced Aric's limbs. He welded a cracked shoulder joint, tightened plating, and replaced severed conduits. Each fix bought them time. Each spark of life returned to the android brought Leanna's hope back into the world. But Mercer's thoughts spun elsewhere. Royalty. A princess. The Empire doesn't forgive this kind of trespass. Law says outsiders who touch the royal family die. No trial, no questions. He should have run the second he had seen her. Should have sealed the vault and fled. But instead, here he was, up to his elbows in royal circuitry, while the countdown ticked towards obliteration. The sound of boots thundered from the corridor again. Closer this time. He grabbed his blaster, but Leanna caught his wrist again. No, she whispered fiercely. They'll hurt him. Fix him first. Kid, promise. Mercer closed his eyes briefly, then holstered the blaster. Fine. But if we die here, I'm haunting you. She smiled faintly, a fleeting spark of innocence. Deal. Arik stirred, levering himself upright with stiff motions. His silver gaze swept the chamber, locking onto Leanna. First, then Mercer. Protective directive engaged. Threat level escalating. Extraction required. Glad we agree, Mercer muttered. He stuffed tools back into his pack, slinging it over his shoulder. Question is extraction to where my ship's docked 2 levels up. Assuming the whole corridor isn't crawling with... The chamber door slammed open. Armored figures poured in their glossy black plating, reflecting the pale light. Helmets obscured their faces, but the insignia was unmistakable Imperial troops. Mercer swore under his breath. He stepped instinctively in front of Leanna crowbar, raised in one hand, blaster in the other. Arik lurched beside him, staggering, but standing, his frame sparking faintly. Stand down, barked the lead soldier voice, distorted through his helmet speaker. Mercer kept his weapon up, though he knew it was useless. One twitch from those rifles, and he'd be vapor. We're not armed, he lied, the blaster heavy in his palm. Turn over the subject. She's not a subject, Mercer snapped, lowering the crowbar fractionally, but not his voice. She's a kid. The soldiers, advanced weapons humming, and then the air shifted. A glow bathed the corridor beyond them, a soft golden light. The soldiers parted like water before a ship. A tall figure entered, draped in shimmering fabric, face hidden behind an ornate mask. Her presence silenced the room. The Empress. Leanna gasped, Mother! Before Mercer could react, the girl darted past him. She ran straight into the arms of the masked woman. Mother, he saved me. The chamber froze in stunned silence. Mercer's heart dropped like lead. The Empress knelt, her gloved hand stroking her daughter's cheek. Then she rose, her gaze settling on Mercer. Through the mask's slits, her eyes glowed with the same golden fire as Leanna's. This man assisted you, she asked, her voice both gentle and dangerous. Leanna nodded fiercely. He fixed Arik. He didn't know who I was. The Empress's gaze did not waver. She stepped closer, graceful, deadly. Mercer forced himself not to back away. You found my daughter, she said softly, in a place sealed for her protection, and your first instinct was to help her. Mercer's throat was dry. He managed a rough whisper. She was crying over her friend. Helping seemed like the only decent option. The Empress raised her hand, the guards tensed, rifles shifting. Mercer felt the hairs on his neck rise. Then she turned slightly to her commander, her voice low. That one. 2 soldiers seized Mercer's arms. He didn't struggle. He barely breathed. Mother, no, Leanna cried. He helped us. Precisely, the Empress replied. Her masked gaze locked onto Mercer's. And now we must decide how to repay his kindness. The soldiers' grips were iron on Mercer's arms, their gauntlets cold through the fabric of his jacket. He didn't resist. Struggling against Imperial troopers would be suicide, and besides, every eye in the chamber was on the Empress. Her presence radiated like gravity, pulling everything toward her. Even the air seemed to vibrate differently when she moved. Regal, deliberate, terrifying. She was taller than Mercer had expected, her figure flowing within shimmering layers of gold and ivory cloth that seemed spun from starlight. The ornate mask hid her face, but nothing could hide those eyes, piercing golden the same as Leanna's. The girl clutched her mother's robes, her voice rising with desperation. Please, mother, he saved me. He saved Auric. The Empress's gloved hand brushed her daughter's hair in a calming gesture. Her tone, however, remained measured and unreadable. He trespassed into a quarantine vault. He touched royal blood. Both are crimes punishable by death. Mercer swallowed. He'd known this part was coming. The Empire was notorious for laws harsher than vacuum. Outsiders were tolerated as long as they obeyed. But touching the royal family, helping them without sanction, that was heresy. Lina's small body shook with fury. Then the law is wrong. He's not a criminal. He's good. The Empress tilted her head regarding her daughter with something Mercer thought might be amusement or sorrow. Goodness is irrelevant to law, child. Mercer cleared his throat, forcing words past the dry lump there. Look, I didn't know who she was. Still don't care, really. All I saw was a kid locked in a pod crying over her busted guardian. I did what anyone decent would do. You want to execute me for that, fine. But don't call it justice. The Empress's eyes lingered on him, unreadable behind the mask. For a long, taut moment, silence ruled the chamber. Then she lifted one slender hand. The soldiers released Mercer, though they remained close enough to act if she so much as blinked. Interesting, she murmured. Most men beg for mercy. You, however, lecture me about justice. Mercer forced a grim smile. Begging's never worked out for me. Lina beamed through her tears, hope sparking anew. See, mother, he's brave. He's kind. The Empress didn't respond. Instead, she turned gracefully toward Auric, who stood stiffly beside them, his frame still sparking faintly from Mercer's hasty repairs. Guardian Unit Auric State Condition. The android's silver gaze flicked between mother and daughter before focusing on the Empress. Mobility at 68%. Cognitive functions 43%. Memory access fragmented. Protective directive active. The Empress inclined her head. Good enough, you will accompany us. Her hand swept outward and the soldiers began organizing. The pod sealed itself behind them with a hiss as the group filed into the corridor. Mercer found himself swept along, bracketed by guards. The journey through the Imperial vessel was surreal. Harsh lights glared off steel bulkheads. Engines thrummed beneath their feet, vibrating like the heartbeat of a giant. Soldiers marched with mechanical precision, their black armor reflecting the pale glow. Mercer kept his eyes forward, but his mind churned. Every step farther into Imperial custody was another nail in his coffin. He had no ship now, no escape, no leverage. Just a toolkit clipped at his belt and a promise he hadn't yet fulfilled. Lina stayed close to Auric, her hand occasionally brushing the android's arm, as though to reassure herself he was real. Every so often she glanced back at Mercer, her golden eyes full of fierce trust he didn't deserve. Finally, they entered a chamber vast enough to swallow his scavenger's ship whole. The hangar bay gleamed with polished decks and lined with sleek dropships. At its center, one vessel dominated a royal transport, its hull gilded with filigree that shimmered under the lights. The air was thick with the scent of oil ozone and something floral Mercer couldn't name. The Empress ascended the ramp of the great ship, her robes trailing behind like a river of light. Her voice carried effortlessly bored. We returned to the palace. Mercer was pushed forward up the ramp into the vessel's cavernous interior. The air inside was warmer, perfumed, the lighting softer. Yet despite its beauty, the transport felt no less like a cage. They traveled in silence, the Empress seated at the front of the cabin, Lina beside her. Auric stood nearby, kept upright by sheer will and loyalty. Mercer was confined across from them, two guards flanking him like stone statues. Through the viewport, the stars drifted past, cold and infinite. Mercer stared at them, wondering if this would be the last time he saw freedom. Lina's voice broke the quiet. Mother, please don't hurt him. The Empress didn't look at her daughter. He broke Imperial law. But he saved me. The Empress's head tilted slightly, eyes glimmering. That is why he is still alive. Mercer barked a humorless laugh. Generous of you. The guards stiffened at his tone, but the Empress simply regarded him calmly. Tell me, scavenger, what would you have done if you had known she was my daughter? Mercer met her gaze, same thing. A flicker crossed her masked features, surprise, admiration. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, a noble sentiment or a convenient lie. He shrugged. Take it how you want. Kid needed help. Lyanna squeezed Arik's hand, relief softening her face. See, Mother, he's not like them. Them, Mercer thought. Whoever had put Lyanna in that vault dismantled her guardian and left them both to die. Whoever the Empress meant when she whispered earlier of traitors. The transport shuddered slightly as it pierced atmosphere. Through the viewport, Mercer saw it, the Imperial capital, a planet bathed in twilight crowned with towers that clawed the sky, their spires glowing like stars. At its center, dominating everything, loomed the palace. Its vast silhouette rose impossibly high, gravity-defying arcs and gleaming surfaces radiating power. Mercer swallowed hard. He thought the Empire impressive from afar. Up close, it was terrifying. The ship touched down with barely a tremor on a private landing pad. Guards waited in precise formation, their armor gleaming. The ramp extended and the Empress swept down it like a goddess descending from heaven. Soldiers and attendants bowed low. Lyanna ran after her mother, Eric, stumbling beside her. Mercer was hauled down by his escort's toolkit still at his side. His boots met the polished stone of the landing pad, and for the first time he felt the true weight of where he was. Not a vault, not a hangar. The heart of the Empire. They led him through corridors of marble and crystal, past columns etched with runes that shimmered faintly in the light. Servants moved silently, bowing as the Empress passed. Everywhere Mercer looked, luxury screamed from the walls, tapestries woven with starlight threads, floors so polished they reflected like water chandeliers crafted from glowing crystals that pulsed with gentle light. To a scavenger who had spent his life crawling through derelicts and junkyards, it was overwhelming. Beautiful, yes, but more than that, alien. He did not belong here. And yet the Empress had brought him. At last they entered a grand hall where a diagnostic table waited, surrounded by tools Mercer had only heard of in stories text so advanced it bordered on magic. Arik was guided to the table, his frame creaking, sparks flickering. The Empress turned to Mercer, her gaze unreadable. You repaired him once. You will repair him again. Completely. Mercer blinked. That why you didn't put a hole through my head? The faintest curve touched her lips beneath the mask. Partly. He shook his head. And the other part, you interest me. The words hung in the air like a blade. Mercer wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a death sentence. That night, Mercer was shown to quarters more lavish than any place he'd ever slept. A bed wide enough for 5 sheets, softer than anything he'd known, a view of the glittering city beyond. Yet despite the luxury, he could not shake the truth. He was a prisoner, a pawn. Somewhere in this palace, enemies plotted enemies who had already kidnapped a princess and dismantled her guardian. Whoever they were, they had power, influence, access. And Mercer, a nobody scavenger, had just walked straight into the center of their game. He sat on the edge of the opulent bed, running a hand through his hair. The words replayed in his mind over and over. That one. The Empress hadn't pointed at her daughter. She had pointed at him. The palace at night was a strange paradox. From Mercer's quarters, the city glittered in the distance, like a galaxy poured onto the surface of a planet, while inside the corridors stretched silent and endless, patrolled by guards whose armor shone with cold precision. Luxury wrapped everything like silk, but beneath it lurked the chill of danger of watching eyes and unspoken judgment. Mercer lay awake in the vast bed, staring at the ornate ceiling. Every nerve in his body told him to plan an escape route map, the quarters count, the guards check the ventilation shafts. But another voice, the voice of reason or maybe exhaustion, reminded him he'd never make it off-world. Not alive, not with half the Imperial army between him and freedom. And then there was the kid, Lyanna, Princess Navarin. She had clung to him with such raw trust in the vault, and even now, when she should have been shielded by palace walls and soldiers, she still looked at him as though he were the one person in the galaxy who wouldn't let her down. Mercer wasn't used to being trusted. He wasn't sure he deserved it. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Soft, hesitant. He sat up wary. When the door slid open, it was Lyanna herself, barefoot in a simple nightrobe, her golden eyes wide. You should be asleep, kid, Mercer muttered. I wanted to thank you, she said, her voice small in the cavernous chamber. For helping Arik. For helping me. Mercer sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. Like I told you seemed like the decent thing to do. No one's been decent to me in a long time, she whispered. Her eyes dropped. They said they were taking me somewhere safe, but they lied. They hurt Auric. They wanted me to stop Mother's treaty. Treaty Mercer frowned. With Earth, she said. Her gaze lifted sharp now despite her years. They said humans couldn't be trusted. That you'd destroy us like you almost destroyed yourselves. Mercer's heart skipped. So that was it, the Eurokind the Empress had spoken of. Humans. Him. Did they hurt you? He asked, his voice low. Lena shook her head. Not me. They hurt Auric. Made me watch. Piece by piece, they tore him apart because he wouldn't tell them what they wanted. He erased himself first so they couldn't take it. He chose it. Her words hit like a punch. An android choosing to sacrifice itself, that wasn't programming. That was loyalty. Family. Mercer exhaled slowly. Who were them? Empire citizens, she said bitterly. Purists. They believe Mother betrays our people by making peace with humans. Purists. The word carried venom like a rot festering inside the Empire. Mercer had heard whispers of factions that despise aliens, traitors, outsiders. But here they weren't fringe radicals. They had power. Enough power to snatch a princess from her guardians. Lina's small hands twisted in her robe. They said humans would corrupt us, that you'd conquer us from inside. Mercer almost laughed at the irony. If only they knew what kind of human I am. But instead, he said softly, some humans are monsters. Some are decent, same as your people, kid. Lina nodded, though her eyes were troubled. The next morning, Mercer was escorted to the royal workshop. The place was a temple of technology tools. He could never have afforded materials worth more than any ship he'd stolen, all arranged with meticulous precision. Auric lay on a diagnostic table, silent, his silver eyes closed. Lina perched beside him, her hand resting gently on his chest plate. When Mercer entered, she brightened. You came. Didn't really have a choice, Mercer muttered, though he allowed himself the faintest smile. He unpacked his kit and got to work connecting probes to Auric's central core. As data scrolled across the hollow display, Mercer's brows lifted. This isn't just military grade. This is artistry, neural mapping tech, stuff I've only heard rumors about. Liana hesitated, glancing at the guard station near the door. Then she leaned closer, whispering, he was made from the same template as me. Mercer froze, tool in hand. Template. His mind works like mine. Feels like mine. We're the same inside. Your flesh, Mercer said carefully. She tapped her temple. He's metal, but here we're the same. Mercer stared at her. Consciousness mapping. If the Empire had perfected it, no wonder the purists had wanted Auric dismantled. He wasn't just a guardian, he was a mirror of the princess, a second copy of her mind. No wonder he'd erased himself before they could use him. Hours passed as Mercer worked. He replaced damaged components, rewired delicate pathways, and coaxed corrupted memory fragments back to life. Liana assisted, her knowledge surprisingly deep. She wasn't just a child, she was trained, prepared. Finally, Auric stirred, his eyes open, silver irises glowing faintly. Princess, he said, his voice stronger. You are safe. Liana beamed. Thanks to John, he found us. Auric turned his gaze to Mercer. I am in your debt. Mercer shook his head. Don't mention it. How's the memory? Fragmented, but improving. I can recall approximately 63% of events leading to our capture. The workshop doors opened then, and the Empress entered, flanked by guards. She was dressed simply now, without the heavy regalia, but her presence remained unshakable. Report, she commanded. The Guardian unit is operational, Mercer said, stepping back from the table. Memory recovery ongoing. Good. She rested a hand on her daughter's head, eyes softening for a moment. You should rest, Liana. I want to stay with Auric, and John, the girl, protested. Tomorrow, the Empress said firmly. The repairs will continue tomorrow. Reluctantly, Liana obeyed, kissing Auric's forehead before leaving. The android's silver eyes followed her until she was gone, concern flickering in their depths. Once the door closed, the Empress turned to Mercer. What has he remembered? Nothing specific yet, Mercer said carefully. But the pathways are healing. Give it time. Her eyes narrowed. Time is a luxury we do not have. The attack was coordinated, precise. They knew exactly when and where to strike. That suggests an inside job. Someone close to you, Mercer finished. The Empress's gaze sharpened. You are perceptive for a scavenger. Mercer shrugged. You don't survive long in my line of work without paying attention. Why trust you at all? She asked coldly. He spread his hands. You don't, but your daughter does. And the android says I'm fixing, not sabotaging. For now, that's enough, right? The Empress studied him a long moment. Then she gestured to a guard. Escort him to guest quarters. He will continue tomorrow. Later, Mercer sat alone in his chamber, staring out at the sprawling city beyond the windows. He should have been dead by now, but instead he was still breathing and tangled deeper in empire politics than he'd ever imagined. The treaty with Earth, purist plotting sabotage, a princess who trusted him. He rubbed his temples, muttering to himself, this isn't scrap anymore. This is a damn war. And somehow he was standing in the middle of it. The morning began with the chime of the door. A servant brought food in a simple tunic in muted colors clothes that would make Mercer blend among staff rather than stand out like a prisoner. He dressed quickly, clipping his toolkit to his belt like a lifeline. The guard who escorted him didn't speak. They wound through palace corridors that smelled faintly of polished stone and ozone, their walls lined with glowing panels inscribed with imperial script Mercer couldn't read. He memorized every corner, every turn, because old habits died hard. When they entered the workshop, Liana was already there, perched on a stool beside Arik's diagnostic table. The android sat upright, silver eyes following her attentively as she chattered. John, she exclaimed, springing down as Mercer entered. Arik remembered something. Tell him, Arik. The android tilted his head. I recalled a partial conversation between our captors. They mentioned a gathering place, the old temple district. One said the others are waiting at Kara's. Mercer frowned. Kara's? It's a restaurant, Liana explained. In the old city, Father took me there once for my naming day. Convenient memory, Mercer muttered, but useful. He pulled up a scan of Arik's systems, watching green and yellow lines pulse across the display. Any faces? Voices. Arik's gaze turned distant. One voice was familiar, female, authoritative. She referred to the treaty as an abomination. Lena scowled. That narrows it down to half the court. Lots of people don't like Mother's policies. Before Mercer could press, the workshop doors slid open. A guard entered, his posture stiff but voice surprisingly gentle. The Empress requests the princess's presence in the grand hall. The ambassador has arrived. Lena's face fell. But Arik, the human will continue repairs, the guard said. Your mother insists. Lena looked to Mercer, who gave her a small nod. Go. I've got this. She sighed theatrically, very much the princess playing the role of put-upon child, then allowed the guard to escort her out. As the door closed, Mercer turned to Arik. All right, let's really talk. What aren't you saying in front of her? The android's silver gaze locked on his. I am programmed to protect the princess physically and emotionally. That includes shielding her from distressing truths. Meaning, Mercer said slowly, you remember more than you're telling her. Correct, Arik confirmed. His voice lowered. The woman who oversaw our captivity, I recognized her. Counselor Thella, the Empress's chief advisor on interspecies relations. Mercer let out a long whistle. That's high up. You're sure? I am designed to recognize faces and voices with 99.8% accuracy, Eric said flatly. Mercer rubbed a hand over his face. So the Empress's right hand is working with the purists. That's not great. There is more, Eric continued. They spoke of the treaty as signing as an opportunity. They have planned something for the ceremony itself. An attack. Mercer's stomach tightened. Details. Corrupted Ark admitted. But they mentioned making an example of the human delegation. Mercer swore softly. Perfect. An assassination plot, a traitorous advisor, and a peace treaty hanging by a thread. And guess who's stuck in the middle? He paced the workshop, mind racing. If he ran to the Empress now with this, what would happen? A scavenger pointing fingers at her most trusted advisor with only a half-broken android's memories as proof he'd be executed before he finished the sentence. No, Mercer muttered. We need evidence. Something she can't ignore. Arik extended a hand, a small panel sliding open at his temple. Connect your diagnostic tool. I can transfer what I have recovered. Perhaps there is something you missed. Mercer hesitated. Those are your private memories. They are evidence, Auric said simply, and you have already proven yourself an ally. The princess trusts you. That is sufficient. Mercer connected the probe. Data streamed across his screen, fragmented images, garbled audio, corrupted text. Most of it was useless, but a few fragments crystallized. A woman in formal robes speaking urgently into a communicator. A warehouse filled with weapons stacked in neat rows. A tactical display of the Palace Grand Hall, red markers highlighting entry points. They're planning something today, Mercer said, pulse quickening. During the signing. The probability is high, Eric agreed. Counselor Thala has access to security protocols. She could bypass them. Mercer clenched his fists. We need proof that can't be dismissed. Can your memory files be authenticated? Yes. My systems timestamp and encrypt all sensory input. Any tampering would be evident. Good, Mercer said. That might save our necks. He unplugged the probe, stuffing it back into his toolkit. Now we just need to catch her in the act. He slipped out of the workshop under pretense of fetching materials. Auric had projected a holographic map from his palm, marking a less monitored service corridor that wound behind the palace's grand hall. The corridors were alive with activity. Servants hurried with trays and decorations. Officials strutted with pompous self-importance. Guards checked identification at every junction. Mercer moved like he belonged, his borrowed tunic blending him in. Years of scavenging had taught him how to disappear in plain sight. The service corridor was narrow, dimly lit, its walls humming with the palace's lifeblood ventilation power conduits, environmental regulators. Through vents, Mercer glimpsed preparations below dignitaries, seating themselves according to rank guards, scanning the perimeter, servants adjusting banners of Earth and Empire side by side. At the center stood a raised platform, a table, and a single document case. The treaty. Atani. Mercer's path brought him to a junction box controlling the hall's security sensors. He cracked it open with practiced ease, bypassing codes with tricks he'd learned breaking into derelict warships. A live security feed blossomed across his handheld screen. Dozens of camera angles, hundreds of faces, and there Counselor Thala standing at the eastern entrance. She directed ceremonial guards with serene poise, her every movement measured. To anyone else, she was the picture of diplomacy. But Mercer saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes flicked too often toward the exits. She checked a timepiece, spoke to a guard, then left the hall. Mercer switched feeds, tracking her progress through the corridors. She moved with purpose toward the diplomatic wing, the quarters reserved for Earth's delegation. Mercer's pulse quickened. He abandoned the junction box and slipped through maintenance tunnels until he emerged near the diplomatic chambers. The corridor bustled with aides, translators, and guards. He melted into the flow, following Thala's path. She stood before the Earth delegation's door, speaking quietly to the guards. They nodded and stepped aside, allowing her entry. Mercer cursed under his breath. He ducked into a small comms room across the hall, watching through its window as Thala disappeared inside. When she emerged minutes later, her face was calm, her movement smooth. She walked down the corridor, speaking urgently into a concealed communicator. Mercer's gut twisted. He didn't need a scan to know she'd planted something. A device. A trap. He stepped out of the comms room, heading for the door of the Earth delegation suite. The guards blocked his path instantly. Orders not to disturb, one said flatly. Mercer's mind raced. Then his mouth moved before caution could stop it. The Empress requests confirmation that the ambassador received Counselor Thala's message. Or shall I tell her you refused? The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, one relented, opening the door. Inside the suite was lavish, draped in banners of Earth and Empire. At its center, a man in formal attire reviewed notes, a face Mercer recognized from broadcasts, Ambassador Chen, Earth's most seasoned diplomat. Chen turned, frowning. You're not Imperial staff. No, Mercer admitted. Name's Jonathan Mercer. I found Princess Lyanna yesterday. Chen stiffened. The missing princess. That was you? Yeah, and I've been working on her guardian. He recovered memories implicating Counselor Thala in an abduction plot, and worse, in something planned for today. Did she give you anything? Chen gestured toward a decorative box on the table. A ceremonial gift. Traditional, she said. Representing hope for the future. Mercer scanned it with a tool from his belt. His blood ran cold. It's rigged, he whispered. Some kind of dispersal mechanism, not explosive chemical, maybe biological, set to trigger during the ceremony. Chen's face hardened. Are you certain? Certain enough I don't want it to be in the same room when it goes off. Mercer's mind raced. We need to swap it. Quietly, let her think her plan's working until we can prove it. Chen nodded slowly. I can provide a substitute. He opened a case revealing a lacquered pen box. Similar weight. Will it do? Perfect. Mercer carefully transferred the real box into a sealed diplomatic pouch, sliding the decoy onto the table. He looked at Chen, jaw set. Now we need to tell the Empress without tipping Thala off. The Grand Hall of the Imperial Palace had been designed to inspire awe. Its vaulted ceilings soared like the inside of a cathedral, inlaid with star-shaped crystals that shimmered with soft radiance. Tapestries depicting imperial victories lined the walls, while a floor polished to mirror brightness reflected the gathering of two civilizations. Rows of dignitaries filled the chamber, their robes and uniforms a kaleidoscope of colors, metals, and banners. Earth's delegations stood out their human forms, strange and pale among the Empire's luminous blue-skinned nobility. At the center, a raised platform held the ceremonial table upon which the treaty document rested in its crystal case flanked by two ceremonial gifts. Jonathan Mercer stood at the back, dressed in borrowed finery that itched against his skin. He felt like a wolf in a cathedral, out of place and far too visible. Beside him stood Auric, cloaked in ceremonial robes to conceal his damaged frame. His silver eyes scanned constantly, cataloging every face, every detail. In the front row, Lyanna sat among the nobles, her feet barely touching the floor, her golden eyes darting anxiously toward Mercer. She wasn't supposed to be looking at him. He wasn't supposed to matter, but she couldn't help herself. Across the hall, Counselor Thala glided through the ceremony like a conductor of an orchestra. Her poise was flawless, her smile serene, her gestures measured. To the court, she was the embodiment of diplomacy. To Mercer, she was a predator, cloaked in silk. He kept his face neutral, his hands clasped behind his back. But every muscle in his body was coiled, waiting. A chime sounded echoing through the chamber. The assembly rose as the Empress entered, draped in her full regalia, golden robes billowing like sunlight. Her mask gleamed and her eyes burned like molten metal through the slits. She was followed by Ambassador Chen, dignified in Earth's formal attire, his face calm, but sharp with awareness. The speeches began, formal declarations, flourishes of rhetoric about unity and peace. Mercer heard little of it. His attention never wavered from Thala and the guards nearest her. Something was wrong. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled. Auric leaned slightly toward him, voice pitched so low only Mercer could hear. Eastern exit. The guards. Their stances are incorrect. Purists. Mercer followed his gaze. 3 guards by the eastern doors stood stiffly, too stiffly, their grips too tight on their rifles, their eyes scanning like predators. Perfect armor, perfect disguise, but Mercer had lived his life among liars. He recognized wolves in sheep's clothing. They were present during our captivity, Auric whispered. Mercer's jaw tightened. Then it's going down here. The ceremonial exchange began. Attendants presented gifts from each delegation, including the box Thala had planted in the earth chambers. Mercer held his breath as Ambassador Chen accepted it, his face betraying nothing. Thala's expression never flickered. No tension, no concern. She believed her plan flawless. And then Mercer saw it, a subtle hand gesture from Thala to one of the false guards. His stomach dropped. They're not aiming at the humans, he realized aloud. They're aiming at the Empress. His voice rose, cutting through the pomp and silence like a blade. Protect the Empress. Chaos erupted. The false guards drew weapons from beneath their ceremonial armor, energy rifles humming with lethal power. Real Imperial security surged forward in weapons firing. Dignitaries screamed and scattered, robes and jewels flashing as they dove for cover. The first shot sizzled through the air, striking the platform where the Empress had stood moments before. Imperial guards threw themselves in front of her shields, flashing as they absorbed the blasts. Mercer sprinted forward, shoving panicked nobles aside. Lyanna was separated from her protectors in the crush, her small body lost amid the chaos. He spotted her golden eyes wide with terror, and his chest clenched. Auric, Mercer shouted. The android moved like lightning robes, flying aside as he intercepted a purist lunging toward the princess. His silver eyes blazed, his damaged limbs straining as he slammed the assassin into the wall with mechanical force. "You will not harm her," he growled, voice metallic and furious. Meanwhile, Counselor Thala moved swiftly toward a side exit, her face still composed but her eyes blazing with hate. Mercer caught her arm mid-stride. "It's over, Counselor," he snarled. Her mask of diplomacy shattered, twisting into raw fury. "Filthy human," she spat. "You have no idea what you've done. This treaty will destroy us all." She drew a concealed blade, its edge humming with energy. Mercer dodged the first strike, but the second slashed across his shoulder, burning deep. Pain exploded through him. He staggered, blood-hot beneath his tunic. Thala surged past him, blade raised for the kill. And then Lyanna stood in her path. The child's voice was steady despite the chaos. "You took me. You hurt Auric. You lied to my mother." "I did what was necessary," Thala hissed. "For our people. For our future." "No," Lyanna said firmly, golden eyes glowing. "You did it for yourself." Thala roared, blade descending, but she never reached the girl. Auric struck from behind his metal hand, snapping against the base of her neck with surgical precision. Thala collapsed, her blade clattering harmlessly to the floor. "Are you harmed?" Princess Eric asked, kneeling protectively before Lyanna. She shook her head quickly. "No, but John." Mercer clutched his shoulder, crimson staining his tunic. He managed a pained grin. "Just a scratch. Your friend Thala plays dirty." Imperial security forces surged into the hall, subduing the remaining purists in a storm of gunfire and steel. Smoke and the smell of ozone hung heavy in the air. Dignitaries cowered behind overturned tables, wide-eyed. The Empress stood tall amidst the chaos, her mask gleaming, her voice ringing with authority. "Secure the hall. Seal the exits. Triage the wounded." Her gaze fell on Mercer, bleeding but still standing. For a heartbeat, her golden eyes softened. Then she lifted her chin. "The ceremony will continue." Minutes later, amid wreckage and bodies, the treaty was signed. The Empress and Ambassador Chen stood side by side at the ceremonial table, guards forming an impenetrable wall around them. Their hands scrawled signatures across the gleaming parchment, a compact between two worlds. When the final flourish was done, the hall erupted in applause, tentative, at first, then swelling, echoing against the vaulted ceiling. The peace that purists had sought to shatter had been sealed, not broken. Lyanna rushed to Mercer's side as a medic bound his shoulder. Her small blue hands hovered anxiously. "You're bleeding." Mercer smirked weakly. "Adds character." "She's not my friend," Lyanna said fiercely, glancing at Thala's unconscious form being dragged away. "She wanted to hurt people, to stop peace. But you stopped her." "Not just me, Kid," Mercer said, nodding toward Auric. "Your brother saved the day, too." Lyanna squeezed his hand tightly. "You were afraid, weren't you? When you found me in the vault." Mercer hesitated, then admitted, "Yeah, I was. But being afraid doesn't mean you can't do the right thing anyway." Her golden eyes softened. "That's why you belong here." The Empress approached, a mask removed now. Her regal features revealed in full high cheekbones, flawless blue skin eyes that gleamed like molten suns. She looked at Mercer as though seeing him for the first time. "It seems," she said, her voice quiet but carrying through the hall, "we owe you another debt, Jonathan Mercer." Mercer forced a grin, wincing as the medic tightened his bandage. "Just happened to be in the wrong place at the right time." "Or the right place," she countered. She looked at her daughter, who still clung to Mercer's hand, then back to the scavenger. "Ambassador Chen has spoken highly of you. He even offered you a position in Earth's diplomatic corps. Yet you refused." Mercer shrugged. "Not really my style." "What is your style then?" He chuckled, though it hurt. "Scavenging, running, surviving. Haven't figured out the rest yet." The Empress's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then perhaps I can help you decide. The palace could use someone with your particular skills, someone who understands both human and imperial perspectives, someone my daughter trusts." Mercer glanced at Lyanna, at Auric standing protectively behind her at the hall, where humans and imperials mingled uneasily, but with newfound hope. "What exactly are you asking?" he said carefully. "A bridge," the Empress replied simply, "between worlds that have been divided too long, starting with repairing what the purists tried to destroy." Her golden eyes flicked toward Auric. Mercer felt something tighten in his chest. A bridge between two species, between his old life and a new one. Too good to be true, probably, but so had finding a princess in a vault. The palace did not sleep that night, not after an assassination attempt had nearly claimed the Empress's life. Security doubled at every corridor, soldiers patrolled the skies in dropships, and every guest of the court found themselves scrutinized with suspicion. Yet for Jonathan Mercer, exhaustion finally overcame adrenaline, and he drifted into uneasy slumber in the opulent quarters the Empress had gifted him. When dawn came, the light spilling through tall windows painted the room in pale gold. Mercer woke stiff and sore, the wound in his shoulder throbbing dully beneath fresh bandages. A tray of food waited on the table, warm breadfruits from worlds he'd never heard of, and a steaming carafe of something that smelled like coffee's sharper cousin. He sat at the window as he ate, watching the city below stir to life. Towers caught the sunlight, throwing spears of brightness into the sky. Traffic streams buzzed between spires. A world going about its day, oblivious to how close it had come to being plunged into chaos. His toolkit sat on the desk, neatly arranged by palace staff. It looked almost out of place among silks and crystal-scarred tools belonging to a scavenger, not a courtier. But they were all he trusted. A knock came at the door. Before Mercer could answer, it slid open, and Liana padded in, hair unbraided, dressed in sleep clothes but wide awake. She carried a small satchel pressed against her chest. "You should be resting," Mercer said, setting his mug aside. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, climbing into a chair opposite him. "Too many dreams. Nightmare." She shook her head. "Good dreams, but loud." Mercer chuckled. "Good dreams can be just as disruptive as bad ones." Liana set the satchel on the table and pulled out a slim black cylinder, the android's processor core. "Mother says you may leave when you wish, but you promised to finish fixing Arik." Mercer tapped the bandage on his shoulder. "Not exactly in peak condition, kid." "You don't need both arms to keep a promise," she countered, eyes shining with stubborn certainty. He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You sound like someone's been teaching you negotiation tactics. Arik says, keeping promises makes people trustworthy, and I trust you." The words hit harder than Mercer expected. He'd spent his life avoiding bonds, ducking attachments, keeping his word only when it served him. Yet here was a child heir to an empire looking at him like he was something solid in a shifting world. "All right," he said finally. "Let's see what we can do for your brother." The Royal Workshop outclassed anything Mercer had ever seen. Rows of tools gleamed like jewels, each designed for precision work that scavengers like him could only dream about. Exotic materials rested in sealed cases, their labels hinting at properties beyond his comprehension. Arik lay on a diagnostic table, silent but awake. His silver eyes flicked toward Mercer as he entered, then down to Liana with unmistakable fondness. "Princess," he said softly. "John's here," she told him, climbing onto the stool at his side. "He's going to fix you." Again, Mercer muttered. He set his toolkit down but ended up reaching for the palace's advanced instruments instead. Working with these was like a starving man suddenly handed a feast. Hours passed. Mercer repaired neural circuits, untangled corrupted pathways, replaced damaged alloy joints. Liana stayed at his side, handing him tools with steady hands. She was quicker than most adults he'd worked with. Arik had clearly taught her well. Finally, Mercer reconnected the processor core, sliding it into place with a soft click. Lights rippled across Arik's frame. His back arched, then relaxed as systems hummed to life. Memory files streamed across Mercer's display, organized now, less fragmented. Entire sequences pieced themselves back together. Neural pathways stabilized, Arik reported, voice smooth, no longer glitching. Memory recovery, 91%. Lina clapped her hands, beaming. "See, I told you he'd fix you." Arik turned his gaze to Mercer. "You have my gratitude, again." "Don't thank me yet," Mercer said. "What else do you remember about your captivity?" The android's eyes dimmed. "The purists who captured us were pawns. They served another hand, someone higher, someone who has not yet revealed themselves. Thala was merely the visible face." Mercer exhaled slowly. "So that wasn't the end of it." "No," Arik confirmed. "The real threat remains." Lina's smile faded, but she held Mercer's arm tightly. "Then you can't leave. We still need you." That evening, the Empress herself visited the workshop. She had set aside ceremonial regalia for a simple tunic, her mask absent. Without it, she looked less like an icon and more like a mother, still formidable, still radiant, but undeniably human in her worry. She examined Arik with sharp eyes, listened to his restored testimony, then turned to Mercer. "My daughter is alive because of you," she said. "My empire still has peace because of you, and now I am asking more." "Figures," Mercer muttered. Her lips curved faintly. "You could leave now. Return to the stars, to your scavenging and smuggling. But Earth will not remain untouched by imperial politics, nor will the Empire remain untouched by Earth. We need someone who can walk between our worlds, someone my daughter trusts." Lina brightened. "Mother let him stay. He belongs here now." Mercer rubbed the back of his neck. "Belonging's not really my thing. Never has been." The Empress stepped closer, her golden eyes locking on his. "It could be." For a long moment, Mercer said nothing. He thought of his life before a blur of runs gone wrong, debts, unpaid partners betrayed. A life lived with one foot always out the door. And then he thought of a blue-skinned child gripping his hand in a dark vault, begging him not to let her brother die. Maybe for once belonging didn't sound so bad. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "That is all I ask," the Empress replied. She touched her daughter's head gently, then swept from the room. Later that night, Mercer stood at the window of his quarters again. The city glittered below, alive with light. Somewhere out there, purists still plotted. Somewhere, unseen hands pulled strings. But here in this moment, peace had been signed. A child was safe. A promise had been kept. Behind him, Liana slipped into the room quietly, Arik trailing her. She climbed onto the chair beside him, resting her chin on the windowsill. "You're not going to leave," she said, with absolute certainty. Mercer raised an eyebrow. "And you know that how?" "Because you fixed more than Arik," she whispered. She reached for his hand, pressing it against her cheek like she had against the frosted pod glass when he first found her. "You fixed me too." For once, Mercer didn't argue. He squeezed her hand, gently staring at the stars beyond the window. A scavenger who had broken into a forbidden vault, searching for scrap, had instead found a future. Maybe not the future he wanted, but maybe, just maybe, the future he needed. And as the palace settled into uneasy quiet, Jonathan Mercer realized something he hadn't felt in years. Connection. Belonging. Hope.